page 1221, 1222, 1223, 1224, 1225, 1226, 1227, 1228, 1229, 1230. Page 1231, 1232, 1233, 1234, 1235, 1236, 1237, 1238, 1239, 1240. Page 1241, 1242, 1243, 1244, 1245, 1246, 1247, 1248, 1249, 1250. Page 1251, 1252, 1253, 1254, 1255, 1256, 1257, 1258, 1259, 1260. Page 1261, 1262, 1263, 1264, 1265, 1266, 1267, 1268, 1269, 1270. Page 1271, 1272, 1273, 1274, 1275, 1276, 1277, 1278, 1279, 1280. Page 1281, 1282, 1283, page 1284. Distinguished Senator Nora Ladi Dadut.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members, I am Nora Ladi Dadut, representing Plateau South Senatorial District. I rise to move a motion that the votes and proceedings of Tuesday, 4th October 2022 be approved. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Distinguished Senator Ida Young.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this visit to Plateau State this morning. I rise to second the motion ably moved by my dear distinguished colleague from Plateau State. As I remain Senator I.D. Gyang, I so second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the votes and proceedings of Tuesday, 4th October 2022 be approved, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The votes and proceedings of Tuesday, 4th October 2022 is hereby approved. Petitions. Distinguished Senator Patrick Ayo Akinyelure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, my name remains Senator Ayo Akinyelure, representing Ondo Central. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, presentation of petition not late but referred to the Committee on Ethics from the Office of the President of the Senate. Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions in line with Order 41 and 3, which is to present to the Senate some petition yet to be laid from the office of the President of the Senate, in order to officially place the petition in public domain to the floor of the Senate and for the votes and proceedings to capture the approval for referral. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, please find below a summary of petition received from the office of the President of the Senate for ease of reference. 1. Petition from Debo Adenira against Federal Medical Center, Abeokuta, Ogun State. Subject matter of the petition, a claim, a clarion call on the Senate to intervene on issues that may lead to breakdown of law and order at the Federal Medical Center, Abeokuta, Ogun State. 2. Petition from Anieka Umo against Shell Petroleum Development Company, SPDC. Petition against SPDC for victimization of Mesa Anieka Umo. Appeal for accelerated action. Attention. 3. EC Ogweokolo Esquire against Nigeria Shippers Council and Transport and Port Management Systems of Nigeria. Report on the petition on the petition of EC Igwe Esquire on behalf of employees of Transport and Port Management System of Nigeria against the Nigerian Shippers Council and Transport and Port Management System of Nigeria for alleged non-payment of salaries. 4. Petition from Suleiman Mohammed on behalf of Shedrack and Mrs. Piago Egbo. Mr. Peter Okoro, the Managing Director, CEO of Aweson Global Services Limited. Petition against Mr. Peter Okafo, the Managing Director, CEO of Avastone Global Services Limited, for defrauding and deceiving Mr. Shedrack and Mrs. Peace Egbo with the promise to build and deliver a 4-bedroom terrace duplex at number A1 Dream Estate, Karimo District, Abuja, to the tune of 39,866 naira 75 kobo only. Finally, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, petition from Uche Alo Esquire against Mr. Mohammed Bello Shitu. Letter of protest and objection to the appointment of Mohammed Bello Cheru as the Chairman, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to align with constitutional provision, federal character principle, equity, national justice, and fairness. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, to the best of my knowledge, the above petitioner is seeking judicial remedy. I therefore move, Mr. President, to seek the indulgence of the Senate of the Federal Republic to lay the above petition before the Senate for official referral to the Committee for further legislative action. I so move, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, distinguished Chairman. Since none of the petitioners is seeking any judicial remedy, you may lay the petitions, please. The petitions are referred to the Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions to bring back within 4 weeks. Any more petitions? Point of order, distinguished Senator Olubimi Adetumbi.
Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations on your national honor. This is your first point of order to receive, and I believe it will hear favorable consideration.
You are welcome.
Order 41 and 51, Mr. President. With your permission, I may read.
You may proceed, please.
Mr. President, I come order under 41 that says the matter for discussion shall, if possible, be referred to the President of the Senate before commencement of the day's sitting, and the President of the Senate shall refuse to allow the claim unless he is satisfied that the matter is definite and urgent. And 51 says, notice shall not be dispensed with in the case of a motion or in respect of any other proceeding for which notice is required, except with the consent of the President of the Senate and the general assent of the senators present. Mr. President, this is my point of order concerning the poor condition of roads in Ekiti.
Well, since you have come under our standing orders 41 and 51, right? I will need to put the question to get the endorsement of at least 1/5 of our colleagues. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the request of our colleague that we allow him to present his motion now, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. You may proceed, please. But have we circulated? Secretariat, where are the copies? Because the standing order is saying we should have copies circulated. Do we have the copies circulated? No, I think somebody is doing something there. Senator Ebizim, is that the motion? You don't have to share it alone now. Give it to other people to also share. So have we all gotten? Okay, may proceed, distinguished.
Thank you, Mr. President. This motion, very brief, is on the poor condition of federal roads in Ekiti State. The Senate notes the deplorable condition of federally funded interstate roads in Ekiti, and further notes.
Hey, Sergeant Adams, please leave that place.
The Senate further notes that Akure Ikere Road linking Ekiti and Ondo is not motorable. The alternative Ilawe Igbaraoke Road suffered a bridge collapse recently due to overuse. Concerned that Ilesha-Ado Road linking Oyo-Oshun to Ekiti has collapsed and currently abandoned due to the complete failure of Aramoko and Igede stretch. The alternative Aramoko-Ijero-Ado Road is currently saddled with heavy traffic and damages as a result of this diversion. Further concern that Omuaron-Otun Road that links Kwara, Niger, Kaduna, and further northern states to Ekiti is equally in poor condition. Worried that access to Abuja through Kogi has been extremely bad for some years between Kaba and Ikole. Notes that the condition of this road has made road commuting and movement of goods and services very difficult, thereby driving up costs of transportation and consumer goods in the state. Further notes that if urgent steps are not taken expeditiously, Ekiti risks isolation from the rest of the country with a consequential collapse of trade and commerce, which is a substantial component of the state's economy and the source of livelihood to majority of the people. Accordingly, the Senate resolves that the Senate Committee on Works and FEMA to jointly investigate the condition of roads of interstate roads in Ekiti State and urge the Minister of Works and Housing to address the deplorable condition of federal roads in Ekiti State. Mr. President, I so move.
The deputy and the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion ably moved by no less a person than most distinguished Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi, my chair all the time. This is a very important and very timely motion, considering that by weekend, that's Friday, Mr. President will be visiting the National Assembly with his 2023 budget. And it's very, very important that the Minister for Works and Housing should keep abreast of issues that concern various parts of this country, especially Ekiti State. Mr. President, I have a very strong link with Ekiti. I started my life there in Ado, and I know all this road he just mentioned. And I said that they deserve attention. In addition to that, I also want to use this opportunity, Mr. President, to say that the end of the year is around the corner. Festivities, people move freely now. And all parts of the country, with the rains coming to a halt gradually, we expect that movement of goods and services across the country will commence in earnest. And I also want to remember the issue of Kogi to the southeast. Those roads are impassable. If you come to 9th Mile Makode Expressway now, they are impassable. And things are very bad. And the same thing applies to all parts of the Federation. So we are using this opportunity to ask FEMA to rise up to the occasion and get this done so that our people can have a free reign of moving to any part of this country without let or hindrance. I thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Robert Brock. I represent Ondo North Central Senatorial District. I rise to support the motion moved by my friend and colleague, Senator Adetunbi. I want to attest to the fact that all he said are correct. But I want to specifically raise the issue of Akure, Ikere, and Adoekiti. In 2020, when the Ministry of Work was defending the budget, I raised the issue why there's sort of, well, I won't call it paddling, but overlap. In that budget, it was said that Akure, Ikere, Ekiti will be, worked upon, resurfaced, and at the same time, Akure, Ado will be dualized. In 2020, nothing was done. I raised the issue again when Minister of Work was defending his budget. And he told me that what he said was that, they are doing the preliminary work. And up to now, Mr. President, nothing has been done on those roads, either from Akure to Ikere or from Ikere to Adoekiti. And that's the situation of all the roads in Ondo Ekiti axis. From Ipele to Ishua, which is the main road, that has been left untouched. I made a statement which provoked some laughter, that the potholes in Ipele, Ishua, can swallow a trailer. and nobody will see. And that's the situation. We went there, we videoed the roads, and presented it to Minister of Works. Up to now, Mr. President, nothing has been done. So I think this motion is very important, and at a time like this when we are getting ready for the consideration of the 2023 budget, the attention of the minister should be directed to these very important infrastructures. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Sane Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I stand to support this bill. This motion, as presented by Senator Olubi. Sorry. The roads all over the country, I think, at this period, need attention. Yesterday, the group CEO of NNPC, in his presentation, made it very clear to us that if care is not taken, the far north will face serious petroleum problem shortage as a result of the bad route that was linking the south and the north, either through Niger or through Kogi State. So I think it has gone beyond selecting just a few routes. There are some major routes in this country that are of economic value to the country. It is important, if we're going into whatever decision we're going to take on this motion, it is very important that we bring to light all the major routes that link either north or south in terms of their economic viability to this country. And there is no better time for government to proactively act than now, because we are going into a period where there will be a lot of movement. December, as Christmas is approaching, there will be a lot of travelings, and also goods need to be transported. So I stand to support this motion.
Senator Issa Jibrin.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am Issa Jibrin, representing the very good people of Kogi East. Your Excellency, I want to thank the sponsor of this motion. With reference to Kogi State in particular, as it is today, Kogi East has been virtually cut off from the state capital, Lokoja. Having said that, on a general note, I want to believe that virtually all parts of Nigeria are having this problem. It may be difficult for the Federal Ministry of Works to do anything in the 2023 budget, given the challenges we are having now with respect to funding. But I want to employ the federal government to fund FEMA, so that FEMA can create palliative measures, okay, by way of direct labors on these various roads throughout the country. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Ibrahim Olurogbe.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Ibrahim Olurogbe. I represent Kwara Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, my contribution is in line with the last speakers on this motion. To say that it's not only in Ekiti State where we have challenges of road in this time. Mr. President, within this week, 2 days ago, my constituents that have to link the federal capital from Ilorin slept for 2 days, and there are still people in front of the road. They could not cross between Kwara and Kogi because the road from after Omo in Ekiti State through Kaba and then through Lokoja are so bad, and they are cut off by flood, and people have to be sleeping on the roads despite the current security challenges. The alternative we have is Niger State. It's cut off as well, because between Makwa and Bida is unmotorable as at this time. So the people from Kwara that have to come to the federal capital territory are not able to. If they have anything to do with the government of the federation or with the government, the federal government, or to link with their people, either they are workers or they have relations here, they are not able to do so. So therefore, Mr. President, I support the last speaker that special attention, maybe a special intervention fund we need to provide to farmer to look at these economically important roads so that there could be movement of people and goods, so that we'll be able, what government is set up to do is to provide welfare. But a part of welfare is for people to be able to seek their legitimate business, and they can only do this if we provide road. Mr. President, we know the alternative people will say there's air. Air is also unavoidable to many people now because the prices are very high because of the international cost of aviation fuel. And many of our citizens they do not have the required resources to be able to do that. So I therefore support the motion, but when we come to prayers, we'll be able to modify it to reflect not only the state, but other very important roads. Thank you, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Let me first thank distinguished Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi for bringing to the national limelight and to bring this issue of roads for discussion in the Senate. Mr. President, from Kaba to Lokoja, from Lokoja to the FCT, all over the nation, the story is the same. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, if you travel between just Abuja here in Yanya to Mararaba and all the way to Kefi, the problem is the same. A journey of just 5-10 minutes between Abuja and Mararaba will take you 1 or 2 hours. And if you are going to Jos and you are caught up on that road, then you spend 2-3 hours within a place where you will spend just 5, 10, 15 minutes before you pass through. Mr. President, I want to use this opportunity to also call on FEMA to immediately look at the roads that lead between Nyanya and Karu and Mararaba, so that they can come to the aid of the people who ply this road every day, because while coming to the FCT every day to work, they are caught up in the go-slow. And the same thing with roads leading to Niger State, to Suleja and all that. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me say I support this motion wholeheartedly, and that the roads linking the FCT between Niger, between Kogi, all the way through to Nasarawa State be immediately looked into, as the workforce of the FCT depends largely on these satellite towns that are bordering the FCT. And FEMA should immediately look into this and ensure that the roads are looked at and something is done and worked upon. Thank you very much.
Senator George Thompson Sekibo.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Senator George Thompson Sekibo. I represent Rivers East Central District. Mr. President, when somebody has headache, you take treatment for headache. When somebody has a pain in the leg, you take treatment for that. When somebody has a pain all over the body, you need to go to a good doctor to actually work out, check out what is the problem. I think the issue is a national problem. It's a completely national problem. For instance, if you are moving from here to the south through Enugu axis, most part of the places are not motorable. If you are taking the Asaba axis, it's about the same thing. But I want to make just a comment. Just like the heart of a man that pumps blood to every part of the human being and then recirculates it back again, that is how the artery of roads in the country are. We evacuate our product, sales activities, economic activities will be disrupted if also all our major roads are bad. And then we create also opportunity for kidnappers, for robbers, when you are slowing down because of traffic, and they are waiting for you, and when they want to come up, they hold you, take you to the nearest bush, you are gone. So if the roads are good, we will reduce kidnapping, we will reduce some of the hazards we have been facing. But where is the fund? That is what I want to answer. Now, in particular, I want to mention two particular roads, even though it's a national problem. The Elelewo on the axis of the east-west road, that is in Rivers State. There have been protests on that road twice or more when they blocked the road for a week or so. Why is that road very important? Mr. President, that road leads us to Nroma Petrochemical, where the federal government has a share. It leads us to the LNG, where the federal government has a major stake. It leads us to the two refineries in Rivers State, where that are federal government owned. It leads us to the ocean terminal, the seaport, the Navy training school. I can mention several institutions that the road leads to. But just a small section that is less than about 4-6 kilometers. That's where I pass to my community. You will spend the day you are lucky 4 hours. If the road is good, from where my house is to my community is about 25-35 minutes. But if you spend four hours on a good day, say, glory be to God, today there is no traffic. Otherwise, sometimes if you leave your community by 4 o'clock in the evening, you'll be arriving your home by 10, 11, 12 in the night. So the next time to go on weekend is difficult. So even campaign will be difficult for some of us who are going to use those routes. So, and another road again, the Port Harcourt-Aba road, it's a small section, about 20-24 kilometers. Terribly, terribly very bad. And Aba is a key supplier of goods and services to that part of the country. So you go there, you see vehicles that you see, a place that we use about maybe 30, 40, 50 minutes, you spend 8, 9, 10 hours. So what do you do? What's a national problem? When a problem becomes a national problem, we think about holistic solution, not target solution, because we cannot work on the good motion our colleague has brought for that area alone. We cannot work on the place I'm talking about alone. Many people have suggested so many roads. What do we do? I am thinking that we should be able to be in a position to advise the federal government or their agencies to put up ideas together and provide funds, either for Ministry of Works or for FEMA, to carry out major rehabilitation works where they cannot do immediate reconstruction, so that we'll have freedom of movement, reduce kidnapping, reduce banditry, reduce assassination, reduce murdering. I think we'll be able to achieve that one. Mr. President, that's my token contribution. Thank you.
Senator Mohamed Adamalero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, while supporting this motion, I equally want to give very important information to the Senate. It is true that the roads in the country generally are in deplorable condition. And we have been having meetings with the Minister of Works and Housing, together with his permanent secretary and all the directors. There was even a time when we invited all the controllers of works to come to the National Assembly to address us, both the committee of the House and also the Senate, on what they are doing about the condition of the road generally in the country. Your Excellency, you could recall that last year, the federal government came up with a tax credit scheme, which was initiated by the NNPC, and about 621 billion naira has been made available for the rehabilitation of major roads in the country. That is apart from the budgetary allocation. The budgetary allocation was about 220 billion naira. And Your Excellency, you could recall that because of the bad condition of the roads
in the country, the leadership of the National Assembly made available about 100 billion naira to repair major roads in the country. And these repairs are right now going on. The NMTC tax credit is meant to augment whatever is in the budget. Equally important is also the sukuk, which usually is rolled every year to complement whatever is provided in the budget. This year, I think about 220 billion naira had been earmarked for rehabilitation of major roads in the country. The NMBC tax credit, most of that money is expended or is to be expended on roads that are linking the countries. Roads that are in Niger State, Kogi State, Plateau State, mostly in the North Central, because it is from the north that you have to cross to the south. You have to cross through the North Central. So all the major roads linking the country are now under rehabilitation. It will take a couple of years to complete this rehabilitation. So it's not something that can be done within a period of 3 to 4 months. There is also limited rehabilitation, which the Ministry of Works is going to do immediately after the rainy season. Limited rehabilitation is a situation where what Senator Adetumbi has talked about, roads that have been washed away, bridges that have been washed away, the Ministry of Work will award contract for the rehabilitation. So I'm sure all the issues will be addressed by the Ministry of Works. Only yesterday, I think, Mr. President, you had a meeting with the Minister of Finance and also the Governor of Central Bank, where you talk about the possibility of raising money to repair the deplorable roads in the country. And I think hope is not lost. Government is doing a lot on the rehabilitation of the roads in the country, but it's not something that can be done immediately. Budgetary allocation alone is not enough, and that's why in this chamber I brought a bill on public-private partnership, which was passed and are now awaiting Mr. President assent, and I'm sure he will approve it. Once it is done, private sector will come in and start, participating in the road maintenance and road construction in the country. So, Mr. President, a lot is being done, even though a lot needs to be done, but we need time. Resources are so scarce, and the little resources we have to make good use of it. Thank you very much.
Distinguished Senator Geshambasi, Chairman FEMA.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me, Geshambasi, Cross River South. Let me concur with everything that has been said by the Chairman Works, His Excellency Senator Alero, but also add that at a time, and I know that in this Senate, we have proffered so many solutions to the executive on road maintenance, both in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. Some of those issues are on His Excellency's table, the President's table, for assent. Issues like the Federal Road Authority and so on, which are sustainable solutions to this road problem. And I hope that he will sign and assent to those bills that are on his table. But at a time when we are having serious problems with our roads that has been attested to by many of our colleagues here, it's curious, and I want this Senate to intervene in this, that the budget for FEMA has been slashed. FEMA's budget has been slashed to 18 billion, down from what it was last year. And it's an issue of prioritization. We need to maintain the road infrastructure we have. My colleague has talked about rehabilitation. That is very different from maintenance. We need to maintain the infrastructure, the road infrastructure we have. And the maintenance contracts are 6 months contracts, typically. And these go straight to the heart of the matter. So while we had done an investigation in this Senate, where we agreed that FEMA would require a minimum of 300 billion every year just to maintain our roads. And then there was a backlog that had not been paid on the FEMA, on the law that had been passed here in 2009 on FEMA, which has never been paid. But we agreed that 300 billion, a minimum of 300 billion, would be required by FEMA to maintain our roads. You have a budget now of 18 billion. I think we need to do something about it. We need to prioritize our roads, especially when it is probably the only means of moving goods and services and people from one point to another. Roads are not, the airfares are too high. We don't have inland waterways. Our only way of moving goods and services and people from one area to another is by road. Therefore, we must prioritize road maintenance. And I want to urge the President and urge you, Mr. President, this Senate should urge the President to take another look at the budget for FEMA. FEMA needs money because we need money to maintain our roads. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. In supporting the motion moved by our colleague, I would like the Senate and the people to know that the roads in Abia State, especially Bende, Abam, or Hafia Road to Aruchuku, going into Cross River and Akwa Ibom, the people of Aruchuku are now going through Uyo Airport to go back home because between Ihechowa and Aruchuku have been cut off. They cannot even go to their villages now. So I also use the opportunity to thank the Minister of Works who have just directed the new contractors that came back to do maintenance work on the Ihechowa to Aruchuku Road. And this country have a lot at stake. We have bitumen in Ondo State, and we have bitumen in Isu in Aruchuku local government. Why can't federal government make it a must that we must develop our bitumen sites to be able to stop importing bitumen from abroad? We have these things in quantity and quality. Our quality is one of the best in Nigeria, in the world. So why are we not developing our bitumen sites so we can use this bitumen to be able to maintain our roads? Because we're importing bitumen. Now prices of bitumen went from 29,000 naira to almost 70-something thousand naira. So federal government must be encouraged, and the Senate and the Committee on Works and Committee on FEMA must also maintain the stand with an NPC to be able to invest jointly to develop the size of bitumen. Moreover, you can see the road between Uturu and Ebonyi State. It's not maintained. Heavy trailers are going there to carry chippings and other raw minerals out of Nigeria. We need the support of FEMA and the support of federal government. My colleague from Rivers State have just mentioned between Aba and Port Harcourt. It's terrible that there are over 1,000, 2,000 containers going there on a daily basis. If you go now, there are about 200 containers on the road that are stuck on the bad roads. So, and there are petroleum products being carried for Port Harcourt refinery from Indorima refinery in Eleme to the north. And they go there, you see drivers. The other day I went there, I saw over 200 vehicles carrying tankers going to the north. They cannot go because of bad roads. So I think the road issue is not only the issue of one side of the country, it's the issue that goes beyond any side of the, when you go to any other place, the same story. So federal government should make effort with the new budget system to be able to invest money on it, especially in developing our bitumen. Thank you, Mr. President.
DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ovie Omo Agege, Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I rise to align myself with the position taken by the mover of this motion, and indeed all of the submissions made by my colleagues. Mr. President, frankly, I wasn't really going to say anything. And the reason I wasn't going to say anything, that this is fast becoming like a ritual. Not too long ago, I believe last week, my colleague from Edo State, my brother Senator Clifford Odia, I believe was the one who brought a motion raising the challenges posed by the decay and dilapidation, not only in the roads connecting Edo State to Kogi, but also, and I remember also in my contribution, alluding to the same dilapidation in the roads connecting Edo and Delta State. Mr. President, at the conclusion of that debate, there was what I would like to call a generic prayer that was approved. But Mr. President, I'm beginning to wonder that for as long as we continue to make this generic generic prayers, nothing is being done. So I decided to rise today, Mr. President, taking into account that on Friday, Mr. President will be here to present the budget. And also taking into account the fact that, yes, this is going to be one of the most challenged budgets that has ever come before us, knowing full well that most of the ministries are only going to be receiving about a third of what they received, in the last budget. But be that as it may, Mr. President, I am wondering if it will not be the best option to take, to not to compare, but to request the Ministry of Works and the Minister of Finance in this budget presentation to actually focus more on rehabilitation, of these failed routes, as opposed to putting money into, I hate to say, even completion, as envisaged, under the current budget. I ordinarily wouldn't be opposed to providing money to complete roads already under construction. But Mr. President, I think at this time, we need to focus more first, without prejudice for the most part, on providing money for completion of those roads. But I think the emphasis now, Mr. President, should be provision of money in FEMA, so that they can at least carry out repairs, on these dilapidated portions before voting money, for either new routes or completion of the existing ones. Mr. President, I think we should take this very, very seriously. If nothing else from this debate, I think that should be what we should come away with, as opposed to just coming to the prayers, which is, like I said, generic in the sense that we had this last week, we're going to have it again today, we may have it again tomorrow. But I think we should emphasize, Mr. President, on the rehab in this budget through the budgetary allocation to FEMA. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Before we go to the prayers, let me say that the issue of road deplorable conditions of roads is all over the country, like all of us here have agreed. The issue is, how do we sustainably maintain our roads? Because this is an every year occurrence. In the rainy season, many roads fail. There's no part of this country that has not suffered from failure of roads and bridges, especially in the last 2 months or so. And this happens almost every year. So it means we have to be prepared. It means we have to be prepared. We have to have sustainable mechanisms for maintaining our roads. I believe that the bill that will deal this problem, a great blow, is to have the roads, the National Roads Bill, signed into law. Only yesterday we had very brief engagement with the Minister of Finance and the CBN governor, urging them to go and look for money. Most of our roads have failed, and we must have roads. Otherwise, our situation, both security and economic situation, will continue to deteriorate, because this infrastructure is so critical to economic development and to a large extent to even giving us the security that we need. We are going to push for that, and the Minister of Works, of course, will have to work with the Ministry of Finance to see how do they get some funds, more funds, because at the moment, the 2023 appropriation may not be as good as 2022. One of our colleagues here have said already that for most of the MDS, they have gotten 1/3, some even less than 1/3 of what they got for 2022. So we are restricted and constrained in terms of our revenues. So we have to find sustainable mechanisms through which we maintain our roads. Let's go to the prayers. There are two prayers. Prayer 1, the Senate committees on works and FEMA to jointly investigate the condition of interstate roads in Ekiti. I said, you have already said the roads have problems. So maybe we don't need an investigation. I don't think we need it's already established. But there's an amendment. Who is amending? Senator Abamoro.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name remains Senator Abamoro. I represent the good people of the Benue South Senatorial District. Mr. President, without prejudice to your explanation that the problems are established, going by this prayer, I want to propose an amendment as follows: that the Senate committees on works and FEMA do jointly investigate the inter and intra-state roads in Nigeria.
No, I don't think intra is appropriate. Intra is supposed to be state roads. No. Intra is supposed to be state roads.
Some of the roads in the states are federal.
Okay, I need a seconder. If there is no seconder, okay, there is no seconder. Amendment Baro Jibrin. Amendment ID Young, Senator ID Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment I have is an additional one, that a strategic road be identified in each of the 6 geopolitical zones for immediate intervention and inclusion in the 2023 budget.
I need a seconder. No seconder. Amendment.
This one now. Yellow, this one.
Senator Dadut.
I am Nora Dadut, representing Plateau South Senatorial District. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I want to suggest this amendment as follows. That is for prayer number 1, that the Senate Committees on Works and FEMA to jointly expedite work on the present interstate roads in Ekiti State. And in Nigeria.
Any seconder?
And in Nigeria at large.
Professor, you are protected. Any seconder? Senator Bello Mandia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. My name is Bello Mandia, I represent Katana South. I rise upon the amendment as moved by Senator Dadla. Thank you.
Those in favor of prayer 1 as amended by Senator Professor Nora Ladi Dadut, Plateau South, say aye. Those against, say nay. The nays have it. Amendment. Senator Michael Ama Nachi.
Thank you, sir. I'm Senator Michael Nachi from Eboy South. My amendment in 1. Still, my amendment is in prayer 1. Yes, you have not finished. So my amendment is the Senate Committee on Works and FEMA to jointly investigate the conditions of federal roads in the country and come up with a method that can give it a lasting solution.
Distinguished colleagues, I think we have taken too many amendments that could not see the light of the day. If you ask me, prayer 1 is not even necessary. Honestly, probably that's why we are not able to amend it. So I would advise Senator Olubimi Adetumbi that you step down prayer 1, withdraw it, and then we take 2 and amend it. Yes, we amend 2, but first let him.
Mr. President, GCON, I hereby step down prayer 1 in consideration for a holistic prayer that addresses the condition of roads in the country.
Thank you very much. So, distinguished colleagues, in effect, there is only one prayer now. That's prayer 2. And let me read it. There is no additional prayer yet. Let's deal with this one. Urge the Minister of Works and Housing. This is the prayer. Urge the Minister of Works and Housing to address the deplorable condition of federal roads in Ekiti State. Amendment. Amendment, Senator Mohammed Sani Musa. Senator Mohammed Sani Musa, amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think to amend this resolution.
Use your mic, please.
It's on. To urge the Minister of Works and Housing to address the deplorable condition of federal roads in Nigeria.
I need a seconder. Senator Mohammed Adamu Bulkachua.
Mr. President, my name is Senator Adamu Mohammed Bulkachua, representing Bauchi North, and I rise to second the motion moved by Senator Abdullah Musa, Sani Musa, who, yes, the amendment which says to repair the roads in Nigeria, in the whole country, not just in one state. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, I don't want us to lose the essence of the motion. Let's do justice to Senator Adetubi. So we are not going to leave other parts of the country, but in Ekiti and other parts of the country, if you agree with that, just to protect is okay. Mohammed Sani Musa, rework the amendment.
Then make it Bauchi and Ekiti.
The amendment is to urge the Minister of Works and Housing to address the deplorable condition of federal roads in Ekiti State and other parts of Nigeria. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, distinguished Senator Mohammed Adamu Bulkachua, you second, because you seconded the first one.
Yes, Mr. President, I, Senator Adamu Mohammed Bulkachua, representing Bauchi North, do rise to second the motion moved by Senator Abdullah Musa that Sani Musa, that federal roads.
What? Did you second the motion? Oh. Okay. Distinguished colleagues, our only prayer has been amended by Senator Mohammed Sani Musa and seconded by Senator Mohammed Adamu Bulkachua. And hold on. We have to vote on this prayer first. Then we'll go to additional prayer. So those in favor of the only prayer as amended, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Additional prayer, Senator Matthew Urogide.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm Senator Matthew Urogide.
I represent the South Central District. Mr. President, my additional prayer is this. I urge the Ministry of Works and Housing to review the design and quality of federal roads in Nigeria, taking into consideration the peculiarity of our environment. Mr. President, if you allow me to...
No, it's okay. It's not a debate. It's an additional prayer, and I'm sure it's understood. Distinguished Senator Sam Egu. Senator Sam Egu.
Mr. President, Sam Egu, Ebonyi North. Mr. President, I rise to second the motion as proposed by distinguished Senator Matthew Orogede. There's no second.
Secretary, you have gotten the additional prayer. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the additional prayer by Senator Matthew Orogede and seconded by Senator Sam Egu, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Additional prayer. Deputy Senate Leader.
The additional prayer is urge the federal government to develop the bitumen. Urge the federal government to develop the bitumen industry in Nigeria to reduce the cost of road construction.
Distinguished colleagues, let's listen to our colleague in silence, please. Minority Whip. I think that side is a bit noisy. Please, distinguished colleagues, you can discuss in low tones, please. But let's listen to our colleagues, please. Go on, Deputy Leader.
Urge the federal government to develop the bitumen deposits in Nigeria as proposed by the chief whip to reduce the cost of road construction in Nigeria.
Can I also say that we shouldn't just restrict it to the bitumen and other raw materials available in the country? I think for road construction, so you can put it if you like. If you want it just bitumen, it's okay. But if you are going bitumen, maybe there are other raw materials that we.
Urge the federal government to develop the bitumen deposit in Nigeria and other road construction materials to reduce the cost of road construction in the country.
Yes, Seconder, the Chief Whip.
Mr. President, I stand to second the motion ably moved by the Deputy Leader.
That's the point, because let me say what the additional prayer is for this side particularly. The additional prayer sought by the Deputy Senate Leader is urge the federal government of Nigeria to develop the bitumen. What? Bitumen what? To develop the bitumen and other raw materials for road construction in Nigeria, just to make the bitumen sites, okay, just to make it cheaper. So, those in favor of this additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The additional prayer, distinguished Senator Patrick Ayo Akinyelure.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, urge the state governments to be involved directly in interstate federal road rehabilitation in their respective states, in collaboration with Federal Ministry of Work towards recovery of costs associated on completion.
You are protected. You are protected. Any seconder. Distinguished Akielure, your additional prayer, the motion is dead. Additional prayer, Senator Uche Ekunife.
Mr. President, thank you very much. No matter the grammar and the support we give to this motion, the most important thing is funding. Without funding,
Give us the additional prayer.
President, to urge the federal government to extend NMPC tax credit scheme to maintenance of road through FEMA as a support.
Is there any seconder? Any seconder? No seconder. Any seconder? Okay. Senator Francis Ali Makena.
Mr. President, my name is Senator Francis Ali Makena, representing the good people of Edo North. I rise to...
Distinguished Senator Uche, please. Is seconding your motion.
I rise to second the motion ably moved by the additional prayer ably moved by Senator.
Okay. I will put the question. Those in favor of the motion for additional prayer by Senator Uche Lilian Ekunife and seconded by Senator Francis Elimekena, say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it. Additional prayer. Additional prayer, Senator Mohamed Aliru.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I remain Mohamed Adamu Aliru, representing Kebbi Central. The last prayer is to implore the federal government of Nigeria to explore the possibility of using public-private partnership in road construction and road maintenance.
I need a seconder. Distinguished Senator Christopher Stephen Ekpeyon.
Thank you, Mr. President of the Senate. My name is Senator Christopher Stephen Ekpeyon, representing the good people of Akwa Ibom Northwest in this great chamber. My distinguished colleague, Mr. President, I rise to second that brilliant additional prayer ably moved by distinguished Senator Alero. I so second.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the additional prayer by Senator Mohamed Adamu Alero, seconded by His Excellency Senator Christopher Stephen Ekpeyon, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. But truly, we have to make efforts to develop the raw materials that are available in our country for road construction, because that will make it cheaper and easier for us to maintain our roads. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of the House bill standing in my name on the Federal College of Medical Laboratory Science and Technology, just Bill 2022 HB 1421. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal College of Medical Laboratory Science and Technology, JOS, Bill 2022, HB 1421, first reading.
Federal College of Medical Laboratory Science and Technology, JOS Bill 2022, HB 1421, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is also the presentation of the House Bill standing in my name on the Federal University of Education, Isiokolo, Delta State, Establishment Bill 2022, HB 1653. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal University of Education, Isiokolo, Delta State Establishment Bill 2022, HB 1653, first reading.
Federal University of Education, Isiokolo, Delta State Establishment Bill 2022, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, the third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Ndume Muhammad Ali on the Chartered Institute of Facility Management Establishment Bill 2022, SB 191. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of it.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Chartered Institute of Facility Management Establishment Bill 2022, SB 191, first reading.
Chartered Institute of Facility Management Establishment Bill 2022, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the fourth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Musa Mohammed Sani on the Pandemic Response and Management Bill 2022, SB 890. Mr. President, we wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate, please.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Pandemic Response and Management Bill 2022, SB 890, first reading.
Pandemic Response and Management Bill 2022, SB 890, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the fifth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Odia Clifford on the Nigeria Insurance Corporation Act, Amendment Bill 2022, SB 946. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Nigeria Reinsurance Corporation Act Amendment Bill 2022, SB 946, first reading.
Nigeria Insurance Corporation Act Amendment Bill 2022, SB 946, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is a motion standing in my name under the committee of the National Institute of Hospitality and Tourism, Establishment Bill 2022, to the Committee of the Whole. Mr. President, with your permission, I wish to move the motion.
You may proceed.
And was transmitted to the President for assent. Observes that some fundamental issues which require fresh legislative action by both chambers of the National Assembly emerged after a critical analysis of the bill by Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief. Aware that a technical committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives and Directorate of Legal Services met and worked on the bill, relying on Order 1, subsection D, and the Order 52, subsection 6 of Senate Standing Order 2022 as amended. Accordingly resolves to resign the decision of the bill as passed and the committee so to the committee of the whole for consideration and passage.
Have you finished moving your motion? Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion as moved by the leader. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, I move that we resolve it to committee of the whole.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion as moved by the leader. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate resolves into committee of the whole to consider the report say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, this is not a controversial bill. So I'll be a little bit fast. Those in favor at clause 1, clause 2, clause 3, clause 4, functions of the Institute, clause 5, clause 6, clause 7, clause 8, clause 9 and 10, and clause 10. Stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clause 11, remuneration, is on page 10 of the report. Those in favor at clause 11, clause 12, clause 13, clause 14, clause 15, clause 16, clause 17, clause 18, clause 19, and clause 20 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clause 21, investment of the fund of the Institute, on page 16 of the report. Those who were at clause 21, clause 22, establishment of housing scheme, clause 23, clause 24, clause 25, clause 26, clause 27, clause 28, clause 29, and clause 30. Stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clause 31, registration of non-Nigerian practitioners, on page 21. Clause 31. Those who were at clause 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clause 41 is on page 28. Those in favor at clause 41, clause 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor at clause 51, on page 33. 52 and 53 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the interpretation on page 35 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the short title stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the schedules 1, 2, and 3 stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the explanatory memorandum on page 41 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the long title on page 1 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate. Plenary.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate reverse to plenary and report progress. I so move.
Minority Leader. Leader, your mic. Minority Leader. Thank you. Those in favor that the Senate reverse plenary for the chair to report progress, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, the Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the National Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Establishment Bill 2022 and approved as follows. Long title as recommended, clause 1 to 53 as recommended, interpretation as recommended, short title as recommended, schedules as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the bill be read the third time. I so.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion for the bill to be read third time.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that this bill be now read the third time, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill for an act to establish the National Institute for Hospitality and Tourism for training, certification and registration of hospitality, travel and tourism personnel in Nigeria and for related matters 2022, third reading.
A bill for an act of hospitality, travel and tourism personnel in Nigeria and for related matters 2022, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is a motion standing in my name for concurrence resolution on the use of excessive force and abuse due to process by Nigerian Air Force against Blue Bullbat Limited, adopted by the House of Representatives. The purpose of this motion is for the Senate to adopt a resolution of the House on the subject matters. Mr. President, with your permission, I wish to move the motion.
Leader, please. Before you move the motion, let me see you. Do you have any idea about this? Leader, you stand it down. Sorry?
Your mic, sir. Okay. Mr. President, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that we step down this to another legislative day.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that we stand down this item on the order paper to another legislative day. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that we stand down the consideration of this item on the order paper till another legislative day, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Leader, Senator Sakibo, you don't have to raise any point of order. I saw you with the Constitution and the red. Leader of the Senate.
The first order, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is the second reading of Nigerian Industrial Development Authority Establishment Bill 2022 SB 1050. Distinguished senators, we recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Tuesday, 4th October 2022. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Musa Mohammed Sani to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
What happened to the first one? You say Mohammed Sani, the first one is step down too. Okay. Distinguished Senator Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I shall start the lead debate on this very important bill with the adage that no country has ever become rich by exporting raw materials and, in modern terms, advanced services sector. The more a country specializes in the production of raw materials, only the poorer it becomes. Industry multiples national wealth. This is a lead debate on a bill for an act to establish the Nigerian Industrial Development Authority and other matters connected therewith, 2022 SB 1050. This bill was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Tuesday, 4th September 2022. The bill therefore sets out to diversify the economy and address the fundamental infrastructural impediments that is hindering production activities in the country. Move the country beyond selling raw materials to a more value-added processing and manufacturing one. Create jobs, generate wealth, diversify the economy, boost exports, and broaden the tax base. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, since the early 60s, abundant oil and gas resources have brought billions of dollars into the coffers of the country, leading to a neglect of other sectors which traditionally provided employment for about 40% of the population and a nascent manufacturing industry. Revenues from oil have hampered efforts to diversify the economy, leading to economic stagnation and recently economic recession, which has brought about this all-important legislation. The main objectives of this bill are to: 1, accelerate the build-up of industrial capacity within Nigeria; 2, increase manufacturing contribution to Nigeria's gross domestic product; drive the process of intense industrialization based on sectors where Nigeria has comparative and competitive advantages; The implementation of the bill, among other things, will facilitate job and wealth creation, provide for economic and revenue diversification, ensure import substitution and export diversification, broaden government's tax effort or tax base. The bill is therefore one of the most ambitious pieces of legislation that puts together a comprehensive industrial plan to diversify the economy, achieve industrial growth, and reduce poverty. This bill will address the age-old constraints that have persistently limited manufacturing. If enacted into law, it will build up industrial infrastructure, prioritize power for industrial use, reduce borrowing, and mobilize funding for the real sector. It will also facilitate youth training in industrial skills, improve our investment climate, raise productive standards, link innovation to industry, and enhance local patronage of made-in-Nigeria goods. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, this bill will provide this country with a robust manufacturing sector that will offer opportunities to Nigeria and Nigerians in the following areas: potential to become #1 in Africa and top 10 globally in many industrial sectors, build up labor-intensive sectors, produce locally for domestic consumer markets, become the manufacturing hub for ECOWAS and Africa, attract investment from East Asia, where cost of labor has begun to rise, diversify exports. The bill focuses on revitalizing the entire value chain from production to distribution of priority sectors and subsectors of our economy. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, from the above analysis, your support for the bill is a support for the much talked about diversification of our national economy, as well as the answer of the 9th Senate agenda on the economy. Finally, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is to say the least, the much needed catalyst to steer the country out of the economic downturn. I therefore urge you, my distinguished colleagues, to rise up and lend your support to the speedy passage of this bill to serve our fatherland, as it does not have any financial implication to government. In line with Order 76, subsection 3 of the Senate Standing Order 2022, as amended, compendium of the financial implication of the establishment of the authority is hereby attached. Finally, I urge you to give this bill the desired support and approval it deserves in view of its peculiar nature and importance to the growth and development of the Nigerian industrial sector. Thank you for your support.
Distinguished Senator Yusuf A. Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues. I rise to support this bill for the following reasons. For so many years, we've been trying to have a tool to assist in the diversification of the economy of this country, but we have always been short of the right tool. I think this bill is going to provide the platform and a tool for the diversification of the economy. However, to diversify the economy, we need the authority, and at the same time, we need to look at the fundamentals of the economy. One of them is the attitude of the Nigerian people. Example, many of us today have unsatiable interest for foreign goods. We spend so much money, so much foreign exchange on putting up the employment of other nations against the employment of Nigerian people. Secondly, we need also to look at the value of our currency vis-a-vis the other values of the other currencies. What I mean here is our currency, in my own opinion, Mr. Chairman, my distinguished colleagues, the Naira is not overvalued. The Naira is undervalued. I am yet to be given a good reason why our Naira is overvalued and continuously being depreciated by a model called classical economics theory. Mr. Chairman, we've got to look at, in addition to establishing the authority, to look at the fundamentals into which the authority will work. I support the authority will give us a platform for the diversification of the economy. At the same time, we will look at, those fundamentals of savings, of utilizing, our banking system rather than the central bank usurping the powers of the other banks, the commercial banks, the development banks, which the CBN is doing at this point in time. Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues, I support this bill 100%, and I look forward to us passing it for second reading, and at the same time going into the public to find out what the public feels about this bill. Thank you very much.
Senator Mohammed Bima Nagi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, my highly respected, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Bima Muhammad Enagi. I represent the people of Niger South from Niger State. I would like to start by commending my brother, Senator Sani Musa, for this wonderful bill. This bill is so important when you go through the history of developed countries. Industrialization is the foundation. We exporting raw materials can never get us out of the level that we are in as a developing country. For us to rise above this level, we need to industrialize. And by so doing, we will generate a lot of employment for our youth. Government will get more money through revenue. There are a lot of advantages when industrialization takes place. Therefore, I would like to stand and support and commend my brother, and I support that everybody should support this bill for second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senate Leader.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, I rise to support this very important bill because with the establishment of this bill, I'm definitely sure Nigeria, particularly in terms of industrialization, will flourish. The last speaker talked about the issue of devaluing or the valuation of the Naira. Yes, when you don't have industries in the country, when there is no industrialization, certainly you will find that the issue, there will be a lot of pressure on the Naira because you find that a lot of people are looking for foreign exchange only to go and buy something outside and then also sell locally. And if you are getting dollar to sell locally, then certainly you are just exerting unnecessary pressure on the Naira. Then the other issue is the area, when this is established, there are key areas where they will have to look at it. Number one, we would have to be stationing this one in each part of the country. That means each state will have to take this one. There must they must establish this authority in each state so that at least we can be able to know which company should be allowed to import, which one should not be allowed to import. Then, like the issue of diversification that has been talked about, the issue of import substitution, all this we have to do. And once we are able to do this, certainly, Nigeria is going to be great. So, Mr. President, I support this bill wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Distinguished Senator Barrow Jibrin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Barrow Jibrin. I represent Kano North. I come from Kano State, the hub, the industrial hub of the entire northern part of this country. Mr. President, no country has ever become economically buoyant without a strong industrial base, without a strong real sector. Therefore, the need to create a strong industrial base in this country cannot be overemphasized. I therefore commend the sponsor of this bill. Mr. President, it is a fact that we have been preaching, we've been talking about creating a sound, robust, up and doing real sector in this country. And I want to commend the present administration because looking at the indices, as we speak, our non-oil revenues are more than the oil revenue, which shows what we've been preaching is being achieved, even though not at the fast rate as you want. But if you want to achieve total economic buoyancy, then of course, we have to agree in totality with the content of this bill. Create the enabling environment. Make sure we have uninterrupted supply of the needed energy to drive a sound industrial system. Well, in this respect, I also want to commend the government because of the AKK project that is now ongoing. In fact, even in Kano as we speak, companies are relocating to the areas where these AKK pipes will pass so that it can benefit from the gas that is supplied by this project. But what we need to do is to harmonize our efforts as put together by this bill. Whatever we do, if we don't put, if we don't harmonize, we don't really work together and make sure that we really touch those areas, the enabling environment, and create the enabling environment, bring about those necessities, those fundamentals, then of course we don't achieve what we want to achieve. And that's why I'm in total support of this bill. We need to work with this bill, get it passed, so that our passion to create a sound and up and doing real sentence will be achieved. I therefore urge my colleagues to support this bill because this is what will lead us to an economic El Dorado. This country will be turned to economic El Dorado if we are able to achieve the content, the intendments of this bill. Mr. President, I so submit.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Before I put the question for the second reading, let me add my voice also to the debate. In the 1960s and 70s, we had the groundnut pyramids and maybe something similar of cocoa and continuous export of our palm produce raw forms. To me, groundnut pyramids was a conspiracy of the colonialists because they simply evacuated our groundnuts in raw forms. They went and processed them and brought them back to us in different forms at higher prices. So they didn't help us really. If they had wanted to help Nigeria at that time, they would have helped us set up industries to process those raw materials. So we were poorer. We're not getting the full value. Similarly, when we export our crude, we don't get the best out of it. And therefore, we need to really, as this bill would want us to do, process, go through the value chain so that we are able to provide not only wealth but employment opportunities for our people. So those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill for an act to establish the Nigeria Industrial Development Authority and for other matters connected there with 2022, SB 1050, second reading.
A bill for an act to establish the Nigeria Industrial Development Authority and for other matters connected there with 2022, second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Committee on Industry to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the second reading of the National Center for Women Development Act, Amendment Bill 2022, SB 1042. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 27th July 2022. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Abia to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Distinguished Senator Betty Apiafi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the second reading of the bill for an act to amend the National Center for Women Development, Establishment Act Cap 15, Laws of the Federation 2004, to enhance the functions of the center and to rename the center after Her Excellency late Dr. Mrs. Miriam Ibrahim Babangida and other related matters.
You may proceed, please.
Mr. President, permit me to lead this debate on the general principles of a bill for an act to amend the name of the National Center for Women Development, Act LFN 204. You will recall that this bill was read for the first time in the chambers on the 27th of July 2022. The bill seeks to amend the National Center for Women Development Act Cap number 15, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to, among other things, correct observable drafting errors in the Principal Act, bring functions of the Governing Council in conformity with other existing legislation, and rename the center as the Miriam Babangida National Center for Women Development in appreciation of her contribution to national development. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I have here with me a list of individuals who contributed to the construction of this center during the time of Miriam Babangida. She raised funds from individuals to build this center, and she commissioned this center in October 1992. And it will be a great honor to name this center after her. Some of the clauses that need to be amended in the center in the bill includes clause 2 and 3, which seeks to amend section 1 and section 2 of the Principal Act by deleting the word national appearing in line 1 and 2 respectively and asserting the name Miriam Babangida. Clause 4 seeks to amend section 5 of the Principal Act. This section deals with the functions of the center, while section 5.2 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting a new section G, H, I, J, and K as listed below. G is to develop measurable parameters and strategic framework to stimulate creative and constructive ideas for enhancing the overall capacity of women in line with the visions of the founding mother of this center. H is to develop capacity building on gender and governance to support activities of women in leadership positions and responsibilities. I, to initiate campaigns that will support women in leadership positions to become effective instruments towards achieving democratic and development sustainability. J, network and build reliable partnership with development organizations to support such initiatives to engender effective participation of women in governance. K, to perform any other functions ancillary thereto. These amendments are necessary to appropriately position the Center for Higher Level Development and to foster international cooperations for attainment of its core objectives. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Clause 5 seeks to amend Section 14 of the Principal Act. Section 14 deals with the powers of the Governing Council, herein referred to as the Council, to award contracts in the Principal Act. The Center is unable to award contracts in excess of 50 million without the approval of the President. This hinders the Center from performing its function effectively, as procurement processes are always stalled. Section 14 is amended by substituting for the Section 14 a new provision. The Council shall have powers to award contracts subject to the provisions of existing laws. We have several laws that deal with procurement process and all of that. So we want the Center to also benefit from those existing laws. Clause 6, 7, and 8 seeks to amend Section 14, 18, and 19, which deals with the functions of the Council. This amendment is aimed at updating the functions of the Council in line with current best practices. The National Center for Women Development is charged with the responsibility of stimulating consciousness towards the attainment of higher level of socio-economic development for Nigerian women at all levels. It serves as a data bank and facilitates the formulation of policies that impact women positively. The Center provides training in skill development and income-generating activities. It also provides forum for guidance, counseling, and mobilization of women in both urban and rural areas. I therefore argue that if Nigeria is to meet the sustainable development goals of ensuring women are full and effective in participating on equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in politics, economic, and public life, there is an urgent need to address the fundamental issues facing the Center, and as a first step to that is the passage of this bill. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the need for the legislation is at the forefront of the fight for women emancipation and development. And I therefore urge you to support this bill and also to ensure we honor the great woman whose vision brought this Center to be for the development of Nigerian women as so moved. Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I don't think there's any need for debate on this subject matter, because as a young man, I grew up very close to my mom.
But we are debating now. You said there's no need for debating, and then...
Mr. President, I grew up to see the passion to which Dr. Mariam Babangida had for the National Center for Women Development. And so for those reasons, I want to move that there should be no debate. We should just go straight ahead
yeah. Okay. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that this bill be now read the second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. There is a clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to amend the National Center for Women Development Act, Cap N15, LFM 2004, to enhance the functions of the Center and rename the Center after Mariam Babangida and for related matters, 2022, SB 1042, second reading.
A bill for an act to amend the National Center for Women Development Act, Cap N15 LFN 2004, to enhance the functions of the Center and rename the Center after Mariam Babangida and for related matters 2022 second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the committee. The bill is referred to the Committee on Women Affairs and Social Development to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the sixth order of the day is the second reading of the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, Niger State. Establishment Bill 2020. Order! SB 365. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 17th March 2021. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Bima Mohammed Inagi to move the motion for the bill to be read.
Distinguished Senator Bima Mohammed Inagi, Niger South.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, my highly respected distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Bima Mohammed Inagi. I represent the people of Niger South. I rise to lead the debate on the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, Niger State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm delighted to be permitted to lead a debate on a bill for an act to establish the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, Niger State. The bill is initiated out of compelling need to establish a federal university that will promote science-based research in all fields of agriculture and maritime studies to maximize the huge agricultural and maritime potentials in Mokwa and environs and facilitate our national socio-economic development. The establishment of this university is necessarily needed to harness the vast natural resources, respond to concerns of rapid growing population and challenging labor market, which only trained experts find vacancies to occupy and make value addition to the ongoing projects and make Nigeria better and self-sufficient in food. The bill was read the first time on Wednesday, 17th March 2022. The establishment of a Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, one of the Nigerian most prolific farming and fishing towns, and uniquely located in Niger State, is imperative in achieving the diversification agenda of Mr. President. If this bill is supported, Mr. President, my highly respected distinguished colleagues, steps towards the realization of SDG 249 and 12, which emphasizes the zero hunger, quality education, industry, innovation, production will be enhanced. The Niger State government, under the able leadership of His Excellency Alhaji Abubakar Sadiq Sani Bello, is willing to donate the premises and structured and existing infrastructure of the State College of Agriculture, Mokwa, which will be upgraded to the proposed university. Existing institutes and facilities in the locality that will be of great benefit and serve as departments of the university include Institute of Agricultural Research, Mokwa, IITA Mokwa Research Station, Mokwa Ranch and Abattoir, Federal College of Wildlife Management, Mokwa, National Institute of Freshwater Fisheries, New Busa, Federal College of Freshwater Fisheries, also in New Busa. The objectives of the bill include establish Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, to provide opportunities for research and training in agriculture and maritime studies, provide technical support to strengthen the agriculture and maritime sectors towards ensuring food security, efficient maritime services, and sustainable economic growth. Utilize the university for background support towards realization of sustainable development goals. Provide research and training opportunities to standardize maritime practices in consonance with it.
Moved by my distinguished colleague, Senator Bima. First, Mr. President, I want to state that when we're talking about diversification of the economy, agriculture is one of the areas that we actually really need to look at. Okay, this specialized university will assist in agriculture and agro-allied industries, okay, in Nigeria, and that will go a long way into assisting the issue of import substitution strategy that we have been dwelling about, to help us to generate a lot of foreign exchange and it will also help us to be self-sustainable in terms of our local consumption. So I therefore support the second reading of this bill, and with respect to the maritime segment of the university, I want to believe that that will also assist in training of various categories of people in various areas of maritime activities in Nigeria. It is on this note that I second the second reading of this bill.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that this bill be now read the second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to establish the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, Niger State, to make comprehensive provisions for its due management and administration and for related matters 2022, SB 365, second reading.
Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to establish the Federal University of Agriculture and Maritime Studies, Mokwa, Niger State, to make comprehensive provisions for its due management and administration and for related matters 2022, second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the seventh order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Finance on the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework, MTEF, and the fiscal strategy paper. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Adeola Solomon Olamilekun to move the motion for the Senate to receive and consider the report of the committee.
Distinguished Senator Solomon Olamilekun Adeola, Lagos West.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague. May I move that this Senate do receive the report of the Joint Committee on Finance and National Planning and Economic Affairs on the 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategic paper. Mr. President, I so move. Receive and consider. Yeah.
Distinguished Senator Albert Basi Akpan Oba.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished and respected colleagues, Mr. President, I rise to second the motion that this Senate do receive and consider the report from the Senate Joint Committee on Finance, National Planning and Economic Affairs on the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework, MTEB, and fiscal strategic paper as moved by the chairman of the Joint Committee. I so second, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You may let the report, please. You may present the report now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleague, the report of the Senate Joint Committee on Finance and National Planning and Economic Affairs on the 2023-2025 medium term.
And are you going to read everything here? But it's a very good document, so we need to take us through the most essential. Yeah. Okay.
medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. Mr. President, you will recall that the Senate at the sitting on Wednesday, the 21st of September 2022, considered the request of Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on the 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, and referred same to the Joint Committee on Finance and National Planning for further legislative action. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, 2.0 represent the background upon which the MTF and FSP paper is based on. And also on page 3, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Page 4 has to do with the membership of the Joint Committee of both Finance and National Planning. The methodology that was adopted by the Joint Committee for this exercise is contained on page 6 and 4.0. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, which include invitation of the government-owned enterprises and all other revenue-generating agencies of the government, and also the MDAs, which has been categorized into 3 different categories: those that are fully funded, those that are partly funded, and those that are not funded at all by the federal government, were equally engaged in the process of trying to see what the government has in stock in the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper for 2022 to 2023. Page 7 include the list of agencies that were invited by the committee, and page 5.0, which starts with the budget implementation for 2022. Mr. President, you will recall that this document was forwarded to us in July when the Senate was going on recess. And the budget performance that can be measured as at the time this document was prepared is as at April of this year, because this is a document that, in accordance with our principle of trying to return the financial year of the government to January to December, we have no other choice than to receive this document much earlier, because we need to work on it before the president should come around to lay his budget. That was why we have a budget performance that stops at April. Usually, the budget performance we should have should be as at 31st of July of this year. But because of the time frame and time constraint, the budget performance contained in this document is as at April 2022. So I will start with the budget performance for 2022 in summary, starting with 5.0. The financial year of 2022 started with a dampened opinion for global growth due to protracted second wave of COVID-19 pandemic, despite the then ongoing vaccination in major economies of the world. It is, however, expected that the growth will rebound as more people get vaccinated and activities increase in major economies. Revenue outturn for 2022. Oil revenue. The gross oil and gas revenue was projected as 9.37 trillion for the full year of 2022, and as of April 2022, 1.28 trillion was realized out of the protracted sum of 3.
Is it 1.28 or 1.23? Okay.
1.23 trillion was realized out of the protracted sum of 3.12 trillion. This represents 39.4% performance. The net accretion to this federation account has been negatively impacted by the high cost of PMS subsidy, resulting from both an increase in the landing cost of PMS and the daily consumption. After accounting for deduction, including 30% derivation, the net oil and gas revenue inflows to the federation account amounted to only 883.48 billion, that is 629.49 billion, or 41.6% less than the prior year target. I'm on page 9, 5.12, Federation and VAT pool account distributable. The account available for distribution from the Federation account main pool was 1.52 trillion. Of these, the federal government received 802.50 billion as at April, while the state and local government received 407.04 billion and 313.81 billion respectively. The federal, state and local government received 107.67 billion, 358.9 billion and 251.28 billion respectively from the VAT pool account. The amount available for distribution from the Federation account was 2.78 trillion. Of these, the federal government received 998.57 trillion, while the state and local government received 506.59 billion and 390.48 billion respectively from the main pool account. Federal, state and local government received 132.70 billion, 442.33 billion and 309.63 billion respectively also from the VAT pool account, the FGN revenue, which concerns the federal government of Nigeria. That is on 5.13. As of April 2022, the federal government retained revenue was only 1.63 trillion, 49% of the protracted target of 3.32 trillion. The FGN share of oil revenue was 285.38 billion, representing 39% performance, while non-oil tax revenue totaled 632.56 billion, a performance of 84%. CIT and the VAT collection were 298.83 billion and 102.97 billion, representing 99 and 98% of their respective target. Custom collection made up of import duties, excise and fees, as well as Federation account special levies, trailed target by 76.77 billion, that is 34.03%. Other revenue amounting to 664 billion, of which independent revenue was 394.09 billion. As at May 2021, FGN retained revenue was about 1.84 trillion. That's 7% of the protected target of FGN share of oil revenue, which was 289.61 billion, which represents 50% performance. While the non-oil revenue totaled 618.76 billion, which represents 99.7% of the protected, and company income tax, CIT, and value-added tax collections were ahead of the target, of the budget target, with 290 billion and 123.85 billion, representing 102% and 125% respectively of the protected target for the period. Custom collection was 204.0 billion, 86% of their target. Other revenue amounted to 762, of which independent revenue was 487.01 billion. And this was a comparison for that period under 2021 and 2022, which we are currently in. For the expenditure outturn, which is on 5.2, the aggregate expenditure for 2022 is estimated at 17.32 trillion, with a protected spending target of about 5.77 trillion to end in April. The actual spending as of April 31st was 4.72 trillion. Of this amount, 1.94 trillion was for debt service and 1.26 trillion for personnel costs, including pension as at April. 773.63 billion has been spent on capital expenditure as at April. 6.0 assumption for underlying oil and gas revenue projection in 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. 6.1 assumption underlying oil revenue. 6.11 domestic crude oil production. The contribution of the crude oil production to Nigerian real GDP declined sharply from 9.25 in the first quarter of 2021 to 6.63% in the first quarter of 2022, rising from 1.8 million barrels a day in 2016 average crude oil and condensate production net of incremental production for repayment arrears peaked at 2.09 million barrels per day in 2018, but declined continually thereafter to 2.0 million barrels in 2019, 1.7 million barrels in 2020, and 1.48 million barrels in 2021. Crude oil production was 0.38 million barrels, 20% below the 1.86 benchmark for 2021 budget. Between January and April 2022, the crude oil production was also 0.29 million barrels per day, 18% below the 1.6 million barrel adjusted production for 2022. The NNPC attributed the recent production disruption to various challenges, including crude oil theft, pipeline vandalization, shutdown of flow station for pipeline, leakage repairs, terminals maintenance, pumps and flare management. The challenges have significantly affected the crude oil export and revenue performance during the period. The NNPC also lifted a total of 8.80 million barrels of crude oil in 2022, representing a 10% decrease from the 9.77 million barrels lifted in March 2022. However, more significantly is the impact of the subsidy on petroleum motor spirit supply in the downstream sector. The sum of 4.0 trillion was provisioned in 2022 Federal Fiscal Framework for implementation of the PMS subsidy in 2022. The NNPC deducted a total sum of 1.43 trillion between February and December 2021, while 947.53 billion was deducted for the PMS subsidy between January and April 2022. The deduction increased continually from 210.38 billion in January to 219.78 in February, 245.77 billion in March, 271.59 billion in April 2022. A direct result of this deduction is considerable reduction in the fiscal significance of crude oil in recent times. There was no remittance from the NNPC to the Federation account from January up to April 2022. An average of 1.77 million barrels of crude oil was produced per day over the last 3 years. Following consultation and stakeholders, crude oil production is projected at 1.69 million barrels, 1.83 million barrels, 1.8 million barrels in 2023 to 2025, respectively. These conservative medium-term oil output projections were adopted to ensure budget realism despite the ambitious post-PIA aspiration of the sector. Mr. President, 6.12 contained therein is the global crude oil supplies and demand, which he clearly stated the role played by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and the OECD. Mr. President, 6.13 talks about the oil price benchmark. The world oil market strengthened recently due to the rebounding global economy led by the emerging economics, generally faster than expected demand recovery, supply shocks due to upstream investment cuts and the production shut down. Item, geopolitical tension and the global supply chain disruption. The market tightening also reflects the decline in the global oil inventories, enhanced energy efficiency, and generated penetration of alternative to oil. As figure 5.6 show, the burning light crude price increased steadily recently from an average of 71.09 per barrel in 2021, 133.73 per barrel as at May 31st, 2022. The EIA forecast that the Brent crude oil price will decline from an average of US $111 per barrel in the third quarter of 2022 to an average of $97 per barrel in 2023. Thus, the world oil price outlook generally remains highly volatile. The forecast considers the heightened level of uncertainty resulting from a variety of factors, including the Russia full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the volume and the timing of the new crude oil production, and the impact of the coordinated release of petroleum supply from the strategic reserve in the United States and in Europe, on the back of the fear of a possible recession in some major economy. However, the Citibank recently warned that the Brent crude oil prices may drop to 65 million barrels per day, $65 per barrel in 2023. In consultation with the relevant stakeholders, a benchmark oil of $70 per barrel was proposed for 2023. Crude oil price is projected to decline afterward to $66 per barrel in 2024 and $62 per barrel in 2025. This estimate took into account of crude oil market fundamentals, market sentiment, and global economic outlook. It is imperative to set public budget, crude oil, and global economic outlook. It is imperative to set public budget crude oil price benchmark well below the forecast to ensure budget realism. 6.2 contains the non-oil revenue baseline, which has played a critical role in government budget implementation for year 2022 to date. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, the assumption underlying the non-oil crude oil forecast for period of 2023 to 2025 are outlined below in view of the decline fiscalized crude oil and the destabilizing effect of the fluctuation. Government has been implementing various reform measures to widen the revenue base, modernize and further improve tax administration, and enhance non-oil revenue collection. In general, the medium-term non-oil revenue forecasts are based on the sustenance of this effort by the government in order to further increase the contribution of the non-oil revenue source towards funding the FGM budget. The medium-term non-oil revenue estimates are mainly determined using anticipated growth in the relevant base for different taxes, the effective tax rate, and the projected tax collection efficiency. Factors taken into account of improvement in this operation of these various tax administration. The tax rates are assumed to remain largely the same during this period. 6.21 include the underlying assumption for the MTF for custom collection, which regarding to import duty, excise duty, fees, and special levy. While 6.22 has to do with the company income tax, which also has done extremely well in 2022 to date. The value-added tax, as contained in the earlier report, their performance as at April shows that it is overperforming. So this year, the underlying assumption which fall under the non-oil revenue shows that the revenue is a little bit much higher than what was projected in 2022 for 2023, 2024, and 2025. Mr. President, 6.24, which is on page 2017, has to do with the electronic money transfer levy. And Mr. President, distinguished colleague, this is one area I want us to look into critically, because we cannot use a unified platform to just one single platform in the transfer of money in Nigeria. And in recently what happened to the Office of Accountant General of the Federation has to do with this. The electronic money transfer levy will continue to be implemented in the medium term. The recently approved regulation governing the administration of this levy is expected to boost collection over the medium term. Estimates were based on the projected volume of eligible outline transfer transactions of about 2.7 billion in 2023, 3.1 billion in 2024, and 3.8 billion in 2025. 6.25, the FGN independent revenue. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, the FGN independent revenue of the federal government was estimated, taking into consideration efforts aimed at curbing revenue leakages, excessive spending, and weak accountability of government-owned enterprises. The estimation of the operating surplus, the main component of FGN independent revenue, is based on strict and effective implementation of these various measures introduced to ensure that GOEs operate in a more fiscally responsible manner. The GOEs will be required to observe the 50% maximum cost to income ratio and substantially improve the remittances in the medium term. Under a tighter performance.
Leader, point of order.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, in line with our provision of Section 8, subsection 3, I want to move that the Senate do extend its sitting beyond the 2 p.m. I so move, Your Excellency.
Order.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that we sit beyond 2 p.m. to consider all other items on the order paper. I so second.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, because we are taking the MTF and the reports of our committees, we have to extend time beyond 2 p.m. So those in favor of the motion that the Senate suspends its Rule 8, Standing Order 8, to enable it sit beyond 2 p.m. say aye. Those against any? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on the 6.25, the independent revenue, what we refer to as they have to observe the 50% maximum cost to income shows that the agencies of the government cannot spend more than 50% of whatever they generate. That is what we mean cost to income ratio. Mr. President, I will go to the medium-term microeconomic framework and the parameters and target for 2025. 7.1 contains the microeconomic projection, which I want us to just look at that what the GDP basically refers to the GDP and the effect of inflation on the economy, which was seriously considered. Also, Mr. President, I will go to 7.2, which has to do with 7.2, which is page 19, which has to do with 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure fiscal framework. Mr. President, 7.21.
Please just hold on a bit. Distinguished colleagues, if anyone needs food or some refreshment or entertainment, we can quietly go and eat and come back so that nobody suffers. I know, Senator Betty, you are complaining of hunger or something. You can go and have something. So, meanwhile, the report, you continue to present the report, please.
Mr. President, I'm on page 19, as I've said, which has to do with the Federation accounts revenues. And I strongly believe that we can look at that. But, Mr. President, I want to plead that there is need for me to explain or read out two major issues here. Because in considering this year medium-term expenditure framework, the federal government considered two major scenarios. And looking at the two scenarios, the first scenario resulted in a fiscal deficit of over 12 trillion naira, while the second scenario resulted in a fiscal deficit of about 11.3 trillion naira. How we arrived at both scenario 1 and 2, I would like my colleague to please kindly let us listen so that we can have a full grasp upon which one of these scenarios was this MTF document was prepared by the federal government. And for us to accept either of the scenario, there are a lot of factors that goes into what they've done to arrive at in preparing this particular document. So I want to plead with my colleague that to take some time, but to follow through so that we can understand what each of the scenario or model they have come up with in preparing this document, it's all about. So I will start with the issue of the first scenario. And it goes thus, that this is the business of unusual scenario, which assume that the subsidy PMS will be sustained throughout 2023, amounting to 6.72 trillion naira. The subsidy. Based on this, the net amount accruable to Federation account is proposed at 7.76 trillion naira. The main pool, that is the VAT pool and the electronic transfer levy, was projected at 4.89 trillion naira and 2.74 trillion naira and 186.36 billion naira respectively. It said respectively in 2023. The oil revenue at 498.06 billion is negligible, which 6.4 of the total Federation account received, as it will be eroded by the fuel subsidy. Other components of the main Federation account revenue include the corporate tax, 1.92 trillion, the custom revenue, 1.96 trillion, the special levy, 344.72 billion, the LLNG dividend, 1.53.73 billion, the solid mineral department, 7.51 billion, and the share of the Federation from the main Federation account pool will be 2.57 trillion, while the state and local government are projected to get 1.31 trillion and 1.01 trillion respectively in 2023. From the VAT pool, the federal government is projected to receive 4.46 billion, the state to receive 1.37 trillion, and the local government to receive 957.73 billion naira respectively. The share of the EMTL, which has to be electronic money transfer, are 20.45 to federal government, 68.17 to state government, 47.72 billion to local government respectively for the federal and state government. That is scenario 1. Scenario 2. This is termed as a reform scenario. In this scenario, it is assumed that the PMM subsidy will end by June 2023, in line with the government's 18-month extension announced by the government in 2022. Based on this assumption, based on this assumption, the net amount accruable to the federal government, the net accruable to the federal government account is projected to be higher as 11.10 trillion. The main pool is projected at 8.23 trillion, while the VAT pool and EMTL are projected at the same level as in scenario 1. That is, what they get in scenario 1 will be the same to be realized in scenario 2. That is 2.7 trillion, 1.36 billion respectively in 2023. The share of the oil revenue will be 3.84 trillion, about 34.6 of the total Federation account received. Other components of the Federation account will remain the same as contained in scenario 1, with corporate tax reporting 1.92 trillion, custom revenue 1.96 trillion, special levy 344.72 billion, LLNG dividend 153.73 billion, and the solid mineral resources 7.51 billion, and the share of the Federation account from the main Federation account pool will be 4.33 trillion, while the state and local government are projected to get 2.20 trillion and 1.69 trillion respectively. In 2023, the revenue share from the VAT pool and EMTL will be the same level as contained in scenario 1, while the federal government is projected to receive 410.46 billion, the state to share 1.37 trillion, and the local government 957.73 billion from the VAT pool, while the EMTL remains the same as contained in scenario 1. We go into the federal, state, and local government respectively. Benchmark, scenario 1. The 2023 FGN revenue is projected at 6.34 trillion, out of which only 373.17 billion or 5.9% comes into the oil-related source, come from oil-related sources. The balance of 5.97 trillion is to be earned from the non-oil sources. That shows that the economy is effectively being diversified. Scenario 2, in addition to subsidized reform, this scenario assumes an aggressive implementation of the cost-to-income limit of the GOEs, resulting in additional operating surplus remittance of 500 billion, while the 2023 FGN revenue is projected at 8.46 trillion as compared to the 6.34 trillion reported in scenario 1, which is 15.1% or 1.51 trillion less than 2022 budget, but 2.12 trillion more than the scenario 1. Of these, 1.199 trillion or 23.6% is projected to come from the oil-related sources, while the balance is to be earned from the non-oil sources. The provision for these signature bonuses is down to 57.0 billion from 280.86 billion projected in 2022. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, page 22. And here we are talking about the first scenario that relates to the aggregate expenditure of the federal government if scenario 1 is to be considered. In this scenario, given the severely constrained fiscal space, it is not feasible to make any provision for MDA's capital expenditure in 2023. In 2023. In this scenario, given the severe constrained fiscal space, it is not feasible to make any provision for MDA's capital expenditure in 2023. That is scenario 1. Beyond what can be funded through multilateral, bilateral, loan-funded, and donors-funded projects. That is what can be funded as using this scenario for the capital expenditure. The FGN 2023 aggregate expenditure is estimated at 18.75 trillion naira, which is 1.43 billion, 8.3% higher than the 2022 budget. The sum of 20.78 trillion and 23.05 trillion are projected to be spent by the FGN in 2024 and 2025 respectively. The breakdown of the 2023 expenditure estimates include the statutory transfers of 609.17 billion, non-debt recorded expenditure of 8.52 trillion, including 350 billion for the recurrent component of the special intervention program. The provision of 6.42 trillion and 247.3 billion have been made for debt service and sinking fund to retire maturing bond issued to local contractors, creditors, respectively. The provision for the debt service include 1.20 trillion for service, ways and means borrowing from the Central Bank of Nigeria, a total of 6.15 trillion, inclusive of 779.31 billion for the GOEs, is provided for personnel and pension costs. This represents an increase of 1.24 trillion over the 2022 budget estimate. This is 37.7% of the projected aggregate revenue for 2022. The aggregate capital expenditure, the CAPEX, planned in 2023 budget is 3.26 trillion. This represents 17% of total spending. Of this aggregate capital, no allocation has been made for MDA's capital. However, 437.43 billion is provided as service-wide vote capital, that is capital supplementation. 306.34 billion is capital component of statutory transfer. 7 billion is the family home fund of the special intervention program. 450.39 billion is the capital budget of GOEs. 40.52 billion for the donors/grant funded expenditure. 13.37 billion transferred to the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority (NSIA), and 1.77 trillion for projects to be funded with multilateral and bilateral loans. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, This scenario 1 contained in it shows clearly that if we adopt scenario 1, there will be no new capital project for 2023, and the only that can be funded are capital relating to all that I've just listed, which include the multilateral and the bilateral agreement which we have reached, transfer to NSI, that is Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, and also all the total number of 40.52 for the government-owned enterprise. Scenario 2. Scenario 2. Scenario 2. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, I want us to follow through. We have read scenario 1. We're going to scenario 2 so that we can know why one should be adopted and the other should be rejected. The FGN 2023 aggregate expenditure is estimated at 19.76 trillion. That is, in scenario 1, it is 18.75 trillion if scenario 1 is adopted. But if scenario 2 is to be adopted, it is 19.76 trillion, breakdown of which contain 2.44 billion, that is 14.1 higher than that of 2022 budget. This includes the provision of 1.68 trillion for the government-owned enterprises, grant and donor-funded project programs amounting to 40.52, the same as contained in scenario 1, and 1.77 trillion for multilateral and bilateral project-tied loans. The sum of 20.78 trillion and 23.05 trillion are projected to be spent by federal government in 2024 and 2025 as contained in the second scenario. The breakdown of 2023 expenditure estimates include the statutory transfer of 722.11 billion, non-debt recurrent expenditure of 8.52 trillion, including 350 billion for the recurrent component of the social intervention program of the government, the debt services provision of 6.3 trillion in 2023 and 106.08 billion lower than scenario 1 due to the lower borrowing requirement. 247.73 billion has been provided as sinking fund and 1.2 trillion in service borrowing from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The provision of 6.15 trillion inclusive of the 779.31 for the GOEs for personnel and pension costs as contained in scenario 1. The aggregate capital expenditure plan in 2023 budget is 4.37 trillion. This represents 22% of the total spending, short of 30% target set by the current administration. The 25.4% less than the 2022 provision and 5.86 trillion. In the outer years, the capital expenditure is about 17% of the total spending, still below the 30% CAPEX target of the planned capital expenditure in 2023, and only 1 trillion is MDA's treasury funded CAPEX. That is, in this year, in scenario 2, only 1 trillion naira can be made available if scenario 2 is taken as the capital expenditure for all the ministries and departments and agencies of the government. Scenario 2. And treasury funded CAPEX, while 437.43 billion is capital supplementation, 411.37 billion is the capital component of the statutory transfer, 7 billion is the family home funded capital component of the special intervention program, 450.39 billion is the capital budget of the GOEs, while 40.52 billion for the donor/grant funded expenditure, 13.37 billion transfer to NSIA, and 177 trillion for the multilateral and bilateral project tied loan. That's scenario 2. Fiscal deficit and deficit financing, scenario 1. The budget deficit is projected to be 12.41 trillion in 2023, up from 7.35 trillion budget in 2022, representing 196% of the total FGN revenue, or 5.50% of the estimated GDP. This is significantly above the 3% threshold stipulated in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of FIRA 2007 as amended. It is instructive to note that the deficit level is despite a projected depreciation of the exchange rate and the fact that there will be no provision for treasury-funded MDAs. The capital project in 2023, essentially, this massive deficit will be funding debt services and recurrent expenditure. If the deficit will be largely be financed by domestic borrowing, considering the narrow window for external financing. Scenario 2. In this scenario, the budget deficit is projected at 11.30 trillion naira compared to 12.41 trillion in scenario 1 in 2023, up from 7.35 trillion in 2022. This represents 5.01% of the estimated GDP and above the 3% threshold of stipulated in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 as amended. The deficit level assumed that the subsidy reform will be implemented from mid-2023 in line with the timeline for suspension thereof. It is important to note that MDA's capex has been constrained by this low revenue, huge petrol subsidy, increased personnel and pension, and high cost of debt servicing. Cost of this significant concern in this debt.
Senator Betty Apiafi, please take your seat.
In both scenarios. To be predicated upon, and that is why I'm coming. That's why I have decided to make sure that you understand the two scenarios of which was considered before the MTF document was presented. Thank you. Very distinguished colleague, I want us to look at the main objective of this year medium-term expenditure framework, which include 8.1, the microeconomic policy objective. Number 2, accelerating economic growth. Number 3, stabilizing a microeconomic environment for 2026, and also improving the business and investment environment. Page 27, under 8.10, facilitating employment and job creation. And 8.16, promoting poverty reduction and equity. And the fiscal policy objective strategy, enhancing government revenue and reduction of fiscal pressures, oil revenues, the tax revenues, custom revenue, Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, let me now concentrate on the observations and findings of the committee. Mr. President, we start from page I'm coming. Yeah. Huh? Summary. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I think with what we have, the
Chairman, I will suggest that whatever you think, you should tell us to make us understand this. You should tell us. No, distinguished colleagues. Distinguished colleagues. Yes. Distinguished colleagues. Distinguished colleagues. Please. This is something that we are going to debate. And if we don't understand it, how do we debate it effectively? So there are areas he thinks we should know. Yes, so let's understand it, please.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, I want to plead with us that we are now in observation and recommendation. And what I want us to note is that, yeah, please, a lot of work has gone into this to arrive at this situation. Sir, I want to say that Scenario 2 was adopted. Yes.
Chairman, Scenario 2 was not adopted. You recommended. Aha. You can't adopt anything. Okay, recommended. Okay.
Mr. President, distinguished colleague, Scenario 2 was recommended to the Senate. And why we recommended Scenario 2 to the Senate was based on the underlying factors as ruled out by us, and which include: one, Scenario 2 presented to us a lower fiscal deficit from 12.41 to 11.30. So we have it. Number 2, Scenario 2 provided for us an opportunity for MDAs to have at least a minimum capital of about 1 trillion naira, compared to Scenario 1 that brings nothing to the table. Scenario 2 provided to us an higher revenue to the federal government from 8.45 trillion compared to 6.31 trillion as contained in Scenario 1. And when you look at all of these, we have no choice than to tag along with what was contained in Scenario 2, which we recommended to the Senate. From there, Mr. President, I go to the observation, then the recommendation, then we conclude. Now, the observation, yeah, Mr. President, yeah. Mr. President, the committee observed as follows. 1, the daily production of the daily crude oil production was conservatively projected at 1.69, 1.83, and 1.83 for 2023 to 2025. 2, the benchmark oil prices of $70 per barrel was proposed in the 2023 MTF and FSP paper. 3, that the current exchange rate of 437.37 was projected despite the huge difference between the parallel market and the official market. The GDP growth rate of 3.75, 3.30, and 3.46 was projected in the MTF FSP paper. 5, the inflation growth rate was put at 17.16. 6, that the fiscal deficit of 11.3 trillion, including that of GOEs, was projected for 2023. 7, that with respect to borrowing in 2023 fiscal year, the committee observed that an estimate of 1.32 trillion, including the foreign and domestic borrowing, has been proposed, but yet to receive the details, which I believe will be transmitted to the Senate after the passage of this document. Also, 8, other parameters proposed in 2023-2025 MTEF documents include the FGN retained revenue, which is contained in the MTEF 2023 to 2025 document at 8.46 trillion, the statutory transfer 722, debt services of 6.31 trillion, sinking fund of 247.7, pension guarantee and retiree of 827.8 billion, aggregate FGN expenditure of 19.76 trillion, I waivers and tax exemption for corporate entities have contributed also significantly to the prevalent huge deficit. That's one of the observations. Also, the committee also observed that the revenue generating agencies are not complying with the Fiscal Responsibility Act and spending their internal generated revenue without approval and not making full remittances into the Consolidated Revenue Fund account in breach of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended and the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 as amended. The committee also observed that there is no common electronic platform utilized by the MDA, Office of the Accountant General, and the Fiscal Responsibility Commission is in reconciling remittance with the MDAs on a real-time basis. 12, the committee observed that some agencies relied on certain government circulars to spend their internal generated revenue contrary to the Constitution and the Fiscal Responsibility Act and other extant laws. 13, the committee also observed that the dearth of inadequate personnel in office of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, as well as lack of enabling power to sanction erring MDAs and bring them to book, is also a major factor. The committee also observed that the non-passage of the budget of the GOEs alongside with the nation's budget has caused a lacuna in the implementation of the appropriation and the revenue monitoring exercise. The committee also observed that most of the GOEs be placed on cost of collection. Most of the GOEs should be placed on cost of collection as a result of this frivolous expenditure of the GOEs, which cannot be explained, and taking advantage of the finance bill, which states that all GOEs and revenue generating agencies of the government can only spend 50% of whatever they generate, thereby taking advantage of the relevant provisions. 16, the committee also observed that the cost of petroleum subsidy, if retained throughout 2023, will be put at 6.7 trillion naira by the Federal Ministry of Finance Budget and National Planning. Based on the information supplied by NNPC, Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, the 2023-2025 MTEF framework, however, recommend elimination of subsidy by June 2023, which is the 18-month program that was put in place by this current administration to extend subsidy for more than 18 months. So consequently, a provision of 3.6 trillion was made for the petrol subsidy in 2023 fiscal strategy paper. In course of our review of 2023 MTEF, we hold consultation with various concerned parties. It is clear that there are general uncertainty regarding the basis of estimating of subsidy cost, including the daily consumption volume, the landing cost of imported products. Impact of local refinery is expected to commence next year. However, what is certain is that Nigerian economy and the proposed fiscal burden of 6.72 trillion in 2023 arising from the petroleum subsidy cannot receive that shock. Recommendation 1, that this Senate do approve the following: the daily crude oil production of 1.69, 1.83, and 1.83 million barrels for 2021, 2022, and 2023 respectively. 2, that the oil price of $73 per barrel of crude oil be approved as a result of continuous increase in oil prices in the global market and other peculiar situations such as continuous invasion.
Chairman, this is your item 1, the recommendation. 2021. Is, huh? You better correct it.
That this Senate do approve the daily crude oil production of 1.69 million barrels per day, 1.83 million barrels per day, and 1.8 million barrels per day for 2023, 2024, and 2025. 2. That the oil price of $73 per barrel of crude oil be approved as a result of the continuous increase in oil prices in the global market and other peculiar situations such as continuous invasion of Ukraine by Russia and other sundry factors, and resulting in savings of 155 billion naira. 3. That the exchange rate of 437.57 be sustained as contained in the MTF FSP document, with continuous engagement between the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, with the view of bridging the gap between the official market and the parallel market. Very distinguished colleague, I'm coming. Very distinguished colleague, very distinguished colleague. While I am recommending this, is to be careful concerning the devaluation of our naira. If I'm coming at one of our engagements with the relevant agencies of the government, we also propose that the exchange rate should go up from the 437.57 that was proposed to about 550 naira to $1, looking at the huge gap between the official market and the parallel market, which currently stood at over 300 naira. We are of the opinion that it does not reflect the true position of the naira. And again, we ask questions concerning the exchange gain, that this exchange gain of over 300 naira that we have, who is taking it? How much is the Central Bank of Nigeria selling these dollars to the Bureau de change? And some of their argument that was offered was that Central Bank of Nigeria has stopped giving out dollars to the BDC. So how is the BDC now sourcing for their dollars that they are spending? So there is a missing link and a missing gap between what the Central Bank of Nigeria is given to us and what the BDC is given. So the BDC now is a market on its own that is not having anything to do with the Central Bank of Nigeria, as reported by this agency, since the federal government through the CBN says they are no longer giving out dollars to the BDCs again. Neither are they even paying the PTA and the BTA at all. So the question now is this: who should be held responsible for these exchange gain differences that is being recorded between the official market and the market and the parallel market? So what was given to us is in line with the NAFEX or NIPEX, or what we call it. That is the rate. That is the market that monitors the daily activities of our exchange rate, and that was why. And what was proposed as of today is not the actual amount. This is far less than what is happening in that particular NAFEX market that monitor the exchange of naira to $1. But because of the insistence of the Ministry of Finance, that was why they jacked it up to 437.57. So I share in your argument that this should not, or is not, the true position of things when comparing the official market with the capital market. But we have no choice, and that is why we put it as a proviso in our recommendation that there should be a continuous engagement between the Central Bank of Nigeria, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, so as to look for a way to bridge the gap between both the money market and the capital market. But if we want to go on full-blown deregulation of our naira so that we can match up with what is contained in the parallel market, I don't know, that remains the option for this particular Senate to take. Number 3. Number 3, the projected GDP growth rate of 3.75 be approved. Number 5, the proposed inflation rate of 7.16 also be approved. Number 6, that the projected new borrowing of 8.437 trillion, including the foreign and domestic borrowing, be approved, subject to the approval of the provision of details of the borrowing plan to the National Assembly. 7, other parameters to be approved by the is to be approved for the 2023 MTF and FFC document as contained and as listed above. Sorry. The committee also recommend that the cost of petroleum subsidy be capped at 1.7 trillion accordingly for 2023, and all relevant agencies of the government be required to take necessary action to keep this petroleum subsidy cost to government within 1.7 trillion ceiling in 2023, and by this action a savings of 737 billion ceiling in 2020, a saving of 737 will be saved, and this should be used to reduce the deficit of 11.3 trillion naira as contained in the MTF FSP document of the government. 8, that the fiscal deficit of 11.73 trillion naira be reduced with a savings subsidy regime amounting to 737.31 billion to 10.563 trillion. The committee recommend that significant reduction in both waivers and the tax exemption of corporate organization to cushion the effect of budget deficit. Sir, what we observe is that a lot of these companies in Nigeria are taking advantage of us. I give you for instance, under the pioneer legislation, it is expected that once a new company wants to float, and in accordance with our relevant tax law, that we should be granted a pioneer legislation of 3 years. But what do we find out? We notice that after 3 years, most of these companies still return to the government for the extension of this pioneer legislation, and thereby indirectly defrauding the government of its legitimate tax return. Because most of them are, some of them are on 10-year pioneer legislation, because it has been renewed more than 3 years, and they have been in business, and they say the business is not profitable. And if any business after 6 years is not profitable, the business should as well close down and go on, rather than taking advantage of the country. And we, though I'm coming, sir, we don't have the shock to continue to renew all policies like this, even though it's contained in our extant law. And we have said that they should come by way of amendment through the Finance Act of the relevant law, the pioneer legislation, so that we put it on record that for you to have a review of your pioneer status, certain criteria and conditions must be met, and the usual minimum tax must be in effect for you to benefit from extension of pioneer status. And that is why we have recommended in this particular document for us to review such policies. On the issue of tax credits, I want to say this. During the discussion earlier today, where issue on roads were being mentioned, yes, I want to say government is doing a lot in this regard. But let me put it on record, and that is one good thing, smart move, that this administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has made, because it's an alternative way of funding our roads. The fund to go on starting and completing provision of those funds is no longer there. And that is why government is toying with the option of PPP, tax credit, and NNPC intervention. Like only the axis that was mentioned today, Ekiti and its environs, 241 billion naira has been invested by President Muhammadu Buhari administration through the NNPC intervention in this axis. Niger State in particular, and all other neighboring states around that area. And that is what I want to share as a point of information. So we also frown at the issue of waivers. Sir, the country does not have the power to continue to grant waivers to so many of these companies. Because the purpose of granting waivers is to encourage production, is to encourage manufacturing. But what we observe is that so many of these companies are trading companies. They are trading companies and they are collecting waivers. And we are making provision to waivers running to several trillions of naira year in, year out. And that was why we, in our consultation with the relevant agency, with expression of with emphasis with Federal Ministry of Finance, we have demanded for all list of companies that have collected waivers from Nigeria. We want to evaluate the extent of waiver that is given, what has been the impact and the effect of these waivers on Nigerian economy. And any of these companies that fail to meet this certain criteria and provision as contained in the document that led to granting of that waiver, we have to be revoked. Because ordinarily, to date, amount that have been set aside or that have been granted as waiver is in excess of 6 trillion naira. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, the committee also recommends that the Revenue Generating Agency should reconcile the account with the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Office of Accountant General of the Federation, and the report of which should be submitted to Committee on Finance for consideration and approval. That there should be a common electronic platform for reconciliation among the government MDAs, the OAGF, and the Fiscal Responsibility Commission for effective monitoring and remittances. Mr. President, why have we recommended a common platform? Recently, we're all aware what happened in the Office of Accountant General of the Federation, where some payments were made through different electronic platforms. Yes, we frown at the idea that if we continue to use one electronic platform like Remitter to transfer several trillions of naira of Nigerian money through one electronic platform, and for every electronic platform, every transaction, there is a commission. And that commission ordinarily supposed to be revenue to Nigeria. But what do we have? We have the Accountant General's office accruing that revenue to be to his own personal use and his office. So that is why we are playing much emphasis that a lot of work needs to go into how this platform make payments and commission given, how it's being administered. Because the several billions and trillions that was reported in the Office of Accountant General, this payment platform formed more than 1/4 to half of the money that was expended through his office. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, that there should be a strict compliance with the Constitution, Fiscal Responsibility Act, and other extant law by all agencies of the government with regard to revenue remittances. The committee also recommends that the relevant oversight committee of the National Assembly are at liberty to remove the recycle project in their budget proposal during the committee budget defense. Mr. President, why we recommended this is because we observed that last year we purchased about, one agency purchased about 300 computers. This year again, that same agency is requesting the government to provide it with another 300 computers. And so many like that. And we believe that if all of these are taken off and we looked into the deficit, the cost of deficit will come down. And that was why we are recommending that the oversight committee, during the budget defense, any agencies of the government who are not in their need of all of this, we should please look at it critically and make adequate recommendation to the Committee on Appropriation. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, we also recommend that the mainstream of annual GOE's budget into the federal government budget process to ensure that same level of scrutiny, procurement, and monitoring exercise. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, this is one area we have seen lacuna that is happening. Yeah? It's page 48.
Go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead, you should look for a copy for him. Secretariat, give him the page missing.
Balancing in budget passage of the federal government and the budget of some of these GOEs is giving problem to the nation's budget. This budget they are about to present contained therein is all the 63 government-owned enterprises, which include their revenue and their expenditure, pensions and everything is contained in this federal budget they are bringing. And that is why you see in this report, we refer to content, including the GOEs. But what do we have? You find out that we passed the budget of the government in December. Some agency will bring their budget in January. We bring their budget in March. We bring their budget in in April. These can no longer work. These are no longer in conformity with the budget passed by the National Assembly. Everything must start now and everything must end at the same time so that government can have a full budget to implement therein. Also, Mr. President, we are also recommending that many of these revenue generating agencies, we are recommending that we should allow them to go on cost of collections. For instance, the Nigerian Port Authority, the NIMASA, National Communications Commission, the new NNPC, the old DPR, and all of that. Sir, many of these agencies generate revenue in pounds, in dollars, in naira. But the only component they report and they tell the government is only in the naira form. There are foreign accounts in NPA. There are foreign accounts in DPR. There are foreign accounts in NIMASA. The question is, who administers this account? How is this money being spent? These are questions begging for answer. And that was why we have recommended an antidote, that there is nothing stopping us as a National Assembly to praise these agencies on cost of collection. We have done the same to FIRS, we have done the same to Custom, and it's working. Sir, despite the 4% cost of collection that is given to Federal Inland Revenue Service, their annual budget still stands between 260 billion to 300 billion naira a year. Their annual budget, 4% cost of collection. There is nothing bad engaging these agencies on one-on-one. Let us look at their cost of collection. Let us know how much is being expended. Then we give them certain percentage of it so that federal government can take the larger chunk of revenue accruing to these people that have been spent on frivolous expenditure. On that note, Mr. President, in conclusion, on behalf of the Joint Committee, I wish to express my profound gratitude to the Senate President and the Senate and the entire Senate for this opportunity to serve. And I am indeed very grateful to all members of the Joint Committee who sacrificed good portion of their research to do this work. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I want to thank you as this is the last MTF that will be presented. I so summon, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished Senator Solomon Adiola Olamilekon, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance. You presented this, listen to us also, please. I want to commend the Joint Committee for a very thorough job, as always. And I must admit, you have done a very, very good job. For us, distinguished colleagues, this is a very serious issue. We are in a very difficult and challenging economic situation. And the Parliament is supposed to provide some ways out. And some of the recommendations are very far-reaching. And I believe that we need to look at them, and where we find them to be likely to be salubrious, to have positive impact on our economy and the lives of our people, we should not shy away from adopting them. Where we think otherwise, we can drop them. But I believe that this particular MTF and the subsequent appropriation bill will present very challenging scenarios for us. And the best way to go about it is not